The Executive Director of Hamilton Hill Arts Center has joined us here in the studio today to help us celebrate the good word of beans and rice, a cultural sustenance. This is a juried show that was brought together at the Arts Center and will be traveling to a couple of other galleries, but I'm going to let our Executive Director tell you all about it. Here's Miki Conn.
Thank you, Janice. I'm so glad to be here. Beans and Rice was my favorite exhibit of this year. It opened in September and ran through October. It will be traveling to the Jewish Community Center in Schenectady for February and March,
cool.
And then later on it will be traveling downstate in the springtime. So it's turned out to be quite a popular exhibit. I'd like to tell you about the inspiration.
Well, that's what I think really interests me. When I first read about it, I thought, oh, this is so really unique idea, I thought, and the way you explored so many different aspects of that idea. So I'll let you continue and share with us that information.
Okay, well, the idea of beans and rice came to me because so many cultures eat beans and rice in some form or another, whether it's chili or arroz con condules, whatever your cultural heritage is, you may find beans and rice in there in some form or other. And I thought, that's the food that sustains us, that's the food that comforts us. And I went from there to question what in our heritage, what do we find as artists in our heritage that sustains us, that keeps us going when the going is difficult, that inspires us and motivates us. It could be food, but it doesn't have to be food. And so the challenge that I issued to the artist was, what in your own cultural background sustains you, and use the title of Beans and Rice as a symbol of what feeds us and sustains us, culturally speaking.
I hadn't thought about how it applied to the artists in terms of allowing us to continue to recreate art.
Right.
So that's really an interesting point. In the call for entries, one of the things that you asked for in the submissions was recipes.
Yes, yes. My intent was, and still is, even though the exhibit's come down, is to put a booklet together that would include the variety of recipes that the artist contributed, because I thought I wanted to show the full aspect of how they felt sustained and fed by beans and rice. So there was the visual images, and then there were the actual recipes. And that was quite a fun part for most of the artists. They got to go back into their families and ask each other, how did great uncle so-and-so make this dish? And, or, you know, how do I make it today? And so the recipes are as fascinating as the artwork.
Well, I thought for myself, my submission, I started taking more conscious note of the beans and rice dishes that I was eating, especially at other, people's homes. And I had just been at one friend's home, was a vegetarian, and she had a great beans and rice dish there. I was like, now how did you make that? And what did you put in that? And through the years, as I've tried different dishes, I've usually inquired as to what the spice or the herb is or something that gives it such unique flavor. So I thought it was a great cross-section of types of recipes and different ideas that people have about what's a great beans and rice dish. And one of the things I found really fun was at the opening. You made a fabulous beans and rice dish.
Well, thank you.
It had ham in it? Or?
It had, turkey ham, because we try to be healthy.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah, it had turkey ham, although the traditional recipe has regular ham.
Okay.
So it had ham, and it had onions and all kinds of seasonings. And I have to say that that wasn't my family tradition, that particular recipe. My daughter, who married a West Indian,
Okay.
learned that recipe from her mother-in-law, and we adopted it. We loved the recipe.
I couldn't get enough of it at the opening. I took a little, and then a little more, and then a little more. I just thought it was fabulous. I just loved the flavor of it. And I know one of my friends that came also, she's like, we've got to get the recipe. So I have to remember to do that.
Well, one of the things I liked was that the recipes, the presentation of the recipes were as varied as the presentation of the artwork. That you had some people who were precise, 1 3/4 cups of this, and
that's
you know, stir for exactly 3.5 minutes, and you know, written very precisely. And then others were the loose kind of recipes where, well, my mother puts the beans and the rice in the pot with enough water to cover it up, and you know, cook it until it's soft. And so that was an interesting insight, or provided an interesting insight into the artists who gave the recipes.
Oh, yes. Well, I think the ones who did that way are just confident and comfortable with, you know, the feel of it.
Right.
How much to put in of each thing, what kind of pinch of this and a pinch of that, you know?
Yep. Yeah.
Now, the show is going to go to Schenectady Jewish Community Center, I believe in February, March.
That's right.
And it's on a cultural exchange, correct?
Yes, yes. We have an exchange with the Jewish Community Center. They have a group of artists that are currently exhibiting works that have to do with their relationship to spirit. Now, when you think about it, cultural sustenance is in many ways related to spirit. And so when this exhibit goes to them, at another point, not at the same time, but at another point, their exhibit will come to us.
All right. And have you seen the work that's going to be?
No, I haven't. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yes, I thought that was pretty exciting. Is that an unusual thing to do, kind of a swap with a gallery, or?
I haven't heard of it before.
I hadn't. You know.
But I think it's a great idea.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think just sharing different experiences and different shows and just different philosophies on things with one another. Now, how did you come about the whole inception of Beans and Rice, a cultural sustenance? I know you talked about it briefly, but how did the whole thing come about, and how long did it take to prepare to get ready for the show?
Well, the process began with the call for entries, which was maybe close to 9 months ahead of when we planned to have the exhibit. And the responses were very interesting. Some people got the idea right off and hit the ground running, and either already had pieces of work that were appropriate for the topic, and others were inspired to create pieces specifically for it. But they had a 9-month period to work that through. Then we looked at the submissions. We have a policy in our gallery that artists whose work we've never seen before submit slides, and we evaluate them as far as how they'll fit into this particular exhibit and so on. Artists that we're familiar with, that we've exhibited in the past, don't need to go through as rigorous a process. All they needed to do was tell us they intended to do a piece for the exhibit, and because we trusted the quality of their work, we didn't need to see it in advance. So after that, then reminding the artists, of course, that we needed the recipes and, you know, biographical information and information about their inspiration, what their pieces were about. Collecting all of that information, doing the publicity, and hanging the show. And there it is. It's an exciting process, and it's, you know, maybe one of the most exciting days is when the pieces start coming in.
Yes.
And you see how people have actually responded and interpreted the piece.
Well, I think also looking at a two-dimensional representation of art is thorough way to view it, but when it actually comes in, it's much more exciting because you actually can touch it and see how, you know, the size of it and the sculptures that came in. And, you know, I think a lot of things, as soon as you see the real thing, it's great.
Yeah.
That was one more aspect also that I want to bring up, that you had asked for what inspired the artist to create for the exhibit.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on any notable submissions for that? Anything that stood out?
Well, one of the most exciting was Stanwyck Cromwell, whose piece we used on the invitation. When he got the call for entries, he called me so excited because completely independently he had been doing pieces which showed Black Eyed Peas. Now, Stanwyck is of West Indian background and grew up eating Black Eyed Peas, and he had already begun interpreting pieces with the Black Eyed Peas, which reminded him of eyes. And anyone who looks at Black Eyed Peas will see that. And he told me the little story about when he was a kid, and his mother would boil the Black Eyed Peas, and he would lift the lid to see how they were going, and it was like a bunch of eyes looking up at him out of the pot. So in his interpretation, you know, the Black Eyed Peas look halfway like Black Eyed Peas and halfway like eyes. 1,000 eyes looking at you.
I remember at the opening, you asked the artists each to stand up individually and speak of the art. And when Stanwyck stood up and he was talking about his work, and he said, "I have been painting the beans, you know, already as the Black Eyed Peas." And as I looked about his work, you know, sure enough, he had probably the real, you know, actual size was about 1 inch, wouldn't you say? Of the Black Eyed Peas that were scattered through his work. And I just love the vivid colors in his work. The main piece, do you remember the title of that we used in the promotional piece?
Right, and I've got my list here so I won't forget. Homage to the Cultures. Is what he called that piece.
You can see in this close shot that it's a face, really, or an image of a face on the front, and he does that whole geometric sort of sectioned out style. I think he has a real style, you know, in his work. So
with very saturated tropical colors. You know, that really gives such a vibrant feeling to the piece.
And a lot of energy, too, you say, in his work. And this other piece, what's the name of that one that we're...
the second one was Mingling of the Cultures. And that's the horizontal one that also has the Black Eyed Peas slash eyes in it. Now, Stanwyck will be having a one-person show in the gallery next September.
Oh, good. So look forward to seeing some more of his work. 'Cause I think there's 3 pieces in
Yes, he has 3 pieces in Beans and Rice.
And they're just so vivid. That energy, you're like, oh my gosh, you know. And he's a very interesting person, too. He had a lot of interesting things to talk about, and his whole philosophy behind each painting. And Barbara Zuber, why don't you give a little mention of what she was doing for the show?
Well, Barbara Zuber was a real surprise. Barbara has a particular style that she's known for, but the pieces in Beans and Rice were a completely different approach for Barbara.
That's not her...
That's not her normal approach. I think she's breaking out into something new, which she's very much enjoying.
They're great pieces.
They are. She calls them montages, and they consist of assemblages of found objects, stones, wood, iron pieces of all sorts, and which she has glued together on a wooden frame or background and varnished. It's primarily monochromatic. Very exciting work. The first piece she actually glued black-eyed peas
Yes,
also in. But as she discovered, that was endlessly time-consuming. And she went on to stones, which gave a similar effect,
yes,
but weren't quite as time-consuming. And we were also concerned about longevity. You know, what happens 10 years down the road with shellac black-eyed peas? Are they susceptible to bugs or something?
Yeah, because I've run into different collage work or assemblages where even the glue itself was eaten, you know? And so I know it is a concern, and she seemed to really place them so specifically too.
Absolutely.
It took her a long time.
Yeah.
When my conversation with her, I understood she did find each thing, and what surprised me was she didn't treat each thing. Like, it was on the piece the way she found it, and then varnished, of course, the whole piece.
Right.
But it all went together so perfectly well. Each found object looked either perfectly distressed or not, in accordance with how the assemblage came together. And the assemblages had figures sort of hidden in there.
Yes.
I didn't notice them at first. I just noticed the great textures and that it was monochromatic. And it was a little while later, after I was looking at them, that I realized some looked almost like a mother and child, or different faces and things in it. I thought they were really great pieces to look at. You had a really diverse artist there, I think, that brought in so many different types of art.
Right.
And do you want to speak about this piece right here and the artist who created this?
Now, this is by Jackie Lake Sample, and she calls it Black Beans. And as you'll see, there are black beans all around the edge and a mask in the center. It's a watercolor. And Jackie is actually just starting out with watercolors.
Oh, okay.
But I love the piece.
Yes, I do too.
And I think I'm looking forward to future watercolors of hers. I think she did a dynamite job. She also was branching out because Jackie is primarily a jeweler.
Oh, really?
So she works three-dimensionally and makes necklaces, earrings, all kinds of jewelry from precious stones. And so this is a very different approach for her.
Well, what I like the way she used the black-eyed peas, sort of, it looked like texture on fabric, or it could be like rain falling from above. I mean, there were several ways you could look at it. And her use of the colors, too, having the monochromatic mask, but then this very vivid blues in it, I thought really complemented each other in a great piece.
Right. Now, I haven't talked with the other two artists about how their piece reflects the theme, other than the beans or the black-eyed peas showing up in them. But I know in this case, for example, that the mask represents Jackie's heritage, her African-American heritage, her African and West Indian roots. And the beans, of course, represent the foods that she grew up on.
Okay. Now, looking at one of your paintings that you had in the show, because you had two paintings in there, as I remember, and the one was a mother and child image, and the other is this beautiful, very, again, vibrant colors with a piece of textile look on one side, which I just want to bring up that you were doing textile design in Kenya.
That's
that
right.
You lived in Kenya for several years, and I think you've brought a lot of things, you know, your world experiences, having lived in Alaska and traveled to Hawaii and all around New York State, and I think you have such a diverse background that you bring that to your work, because I think especially this piece we're looking at with the textile in it, that it's a very diverse painting with diverse objects in it. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah. In thinking about what sustained me, I call this piece my piece of heaven, but it could also be called body, mind, and spirit.
I can see that.
Because the collard greens, for example, the collard greens my personal joke on myself is that wherever I live, I have to grow collard greens. And whether I have time to harvest and eat them, it doesn't matter. I have to grow them. I have to get down in the dirt and make them grow. So collard greens are root me, sustain me, keep me grounded, not just to eat them, but to raise them, the whole process of raising them. So that's that part of the painting. Then next to the collard greens, you see the drums and musical instruments.
Yes.
Well, drums are a part of my culture as an African American. Drums are in me, body and soul, and in more recent years I started drumming myself and making drums and expressing that fascination with drums. So drums are an important part of what sustains me. And then next to that is the fabric, the textile, and that represents the intellect for me.
Oh, okay.
Because when I worked as a fabric designer, it was in some ways an intuitive process, and in other ways it was an intellectual process, a thought-out process. The fabrics that I made were for printing, and so they had to match end to end. I had to imagine how it would look on a bolt of cloth as opposed to just a little section. So that brought in the intellect and the mind in the sense of intent, having an intention to be carried out. The African fabrics also speaking to my heritage.
Okay.
Then in addition to that, along the bottom you'll see the squash blossoms. And that has to do with my spiritual beliefs. And as a practitioner of the Yoruba faith, I am a priestess of Oshun, and the pumpkin is one of the vegetables, plants that I hold very dear on account of that. And so pumpkins grow wild in my garden. I don't plant them, I don't plan them. They just grow there as they please. And so that symbolizes my spirit connection, as well as the cowrie seeds, cowrie shells, sorry, down the side.
Down the side. Oh, that was a connection with your spiritual self also. Okay, I love the story about the pumpkins were growing wild in your garden that you shared with me. Your celebration of the Yoruba priestesshood of many years in that. I think that was really interesting. But I think, again, in your work, you really then are symbolically, you're painting symbolically for different ideas about your culture, which I think makes it really exciting. I've seen some of your textile work, too. I think the screen prints that you've done. And now moving to the sculptor that you had at the show. Do you want to speak about that?
Yeah, that was a treat. This is Akua Leslie Hope, and she is new to the gallery here. She comes from Corning, New York, and it's interesting that she should work in glass.
Yeah, that's
coming from Corning.
Instead, I'm thinking, okay, now that all comes
that
together.
Connection
makes sense, right?
Yeah. Akua is also a poet, and is, but does a lot of different kinds of work in glass. This is also a new foray for her into the three-dimensional sculptural kinds of work. And one of the pieces, you see the piece that's a kind of a teepee shape, and that's called Spirit House, and has to do with her Native heritage. She is African American and Native American, and so her Native heritage is spoken to in that piece. The other two pieces, one is soul guitar, which has to do with music and its place in her life. And the third one is soulship, and that has to do with the Middle Passage, the passage of slaves to the Western world, and the souls that both made it and did not make it.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I liked her pieces, and the way you displayed everything, too, looked really great. It was really interesting. And then Francine's work?
Oh, that's Francelise.
Francelise
Dawkins.
Dawkins.
Yes,
Okay.
she is a textile fabric worker. Her technique she calls silk collage. And it is quilting and applique. This particular piece called Home Caring shows a woman working with a, what do you call it? That you pound, a mortar and pestle kind of thing. With the mortar and pestle and other home implements and sort of showing the home as that which sustains and grounds and feeds you.
Oh, okay. So that was her thinking behind it. That's interesting too. 'Cause that's a nice piece. So she does primarily textile montages, really, with the fabric, like quilting kind of images.
Yes, but her pieces are for display as opposed to functional pieces.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, that was neat.
Yeah.
And who else do we have there in the show?
Let's see. We've got Catherine Rivas has done a piece that she calls Hot, Hot Chili. And she has the recipe for chili, or we have her recipe for chili now. And as you can see in this piece, it's a very vibrant scene with the chili peppers all around it and the flames coming out of the young girl's mouth, and it harkens back to her childhood encounters with chili.
Almost as if the chili peppers are kind of bouncing around there on the painting, too.
Right.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
And Barbara is a retired, Catherine is a retired school teacher. She taught in the Troy school system, taught art in the Troy system.
And I think there's just one more,
Let's see. Yes, Janice Irwin.
Yes?
Yes, last but not least. I think, you're the only one we haven't talked about.
I'm going to make sure we cover everyone.
Right, right. Well, let's talk about your pieces. They were very exciting, got a lot of positive feedback from your work, and you sold one.
Yes, which was really exciting. I was glad for that.
Yeah.
This was one of the pieces that I had in there, Adero, which is a West African word for sort of like praising to God, and that's what I thought of more, was about the spiritual connection and use of global images to connect with culture and to unite people. This one I painted specifically for the show, as we were talking about that Stanwyck had already painted his black eyed peas prior, but I did paint this one specifically for it. And felt very fortunate to be part of the show. And then, I had 4 pieces there, and well, you could say what happened then.
Well, as I said, one of the pieces, which one was that? Let me see.
Ascend.
That was Ascend, yes. That one was sold, and we were very pleased about that. Lot of interest in your work.
Oh, good, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I love being a part of it, and I look forward to being part of the cultural exchange and everything, too.
Yeah.
Miki, there's so much more to say about Miki Conn. She has a lot of very diverse background, as I mentioned before, but today we got to share with you a bit about beans and rice, a cultural sustenance. And I hope that Miki will give us a phone number or email address or something for the audience to get in contact with you.
Well, I would love you to call and come and visit and come and see our gallery exhibits as well as our other activities at the Hamilton Hill Art Center. Our number is area code 518-346-1262, and you can email us at, and I'll say this slowly, arts, ARTS, at, spelled out, ATHHAC, at the little sign, AOL.com. So it's arts at HHAC, ampersand, AOL.com.
And look closely at the end credits, because we will have it written out for you on the screen. Hamilton Hill Arts Center, after-school programs for children, classes for adults and children, Saturday programs, always something exciting going on there, and includes the Jerry Burrell Gallery. So please stop by and check it out, and thank you for joining us.